Welcome to the Fit 15 podcast show, where you'll find health and fitness inspiration, motivation, and information shared in 15-minute episodes. Tune in while getting a move on to make leading and enjoying the benefits of a healthy lifestyle almost too easy. It's the Fit 15.
And now your host, Catherine Turley.
Welcome to the Fit 15 podcast show. I'm your host, Catherine Turley, and I'm so excited to be sharing with you today what is the first episode of the show for the new year, 2020. And instead of encouraging you to start something today, I'm actually going to encourage you, with the help of my guests, to stop doing something, and that is to stop self-sabotage. My guest today is the author of the recently published book, Stop Self-Sabotage, Dr. Judy Ho, and I have loved and enjoyed her book and found it tremendously helpful in my own life, and I'm so excited for you to get some of her tips today through the podcast, but hopefully get to check out her book either by purchasing it for yourself and or a friend. Maybe you'll have an accountability buddy to go through the book with if you do that, and also by entering the giveaway. Dr. Judy has so generously offered to give away a signed copy of her book. So stay tuned, check out the show notes to learn how to enter that. And before I bring Dr. Judy on, I want to tell you a little bit more about her. You might not have heard her speaking on a podcast before, but you might have seen her. And here's a little bit more about that. Dr. Judy Ho is a triple board certified and licensed clinical and forensic neuropsychologist, a tenured associate professor at Pepperdine University, and published author. Dr. Judy maintains a private practice in Manhattan Beach, California, where she specializes in comprehensive neuropsychological assessments and expert witness work. She regularly appears as an expert psychologist on television and other media and is currently a co-host on CBS's Face the Truth and author of Self-Sabotage. She is a two-time recipient of the National Institute of Mental Health Services Research Award and hosts an active research program to improve mental health care for high-need populations. Let's bring her on to learn more of her tips and about the book. Well, welcome to the podcast, Dr. Judy. I'm so excited and honored to have you as my guest today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about this conversation.
So I found the book on Instagram and thought it looks really cool. I love the cover. It really sticks out. And I thought this is something I could probably use in my own life. But could you tell us and share for the listeners what inspired you to write the book and why you wanted to put it out there?
Yeah, I wanted to write the book because I see self-sabotage everywhere. And I feel like even the most successful people self-sabotage, and my theory is that it's biologically and evolutionarily rooted, which means that we all have the propensity to do it sometimes. Mm-hmm. But if you find yourself doing it more and more, particularly in specific areas of life, then maybe it's time to take a look at it and try to nip it in the bud. And in my experience, in general, people don't self-sabotage across all the domains of their life. Mm-hmm. They tend to self-sabotage, only like in one domain, or, like maybe their work is going great, but not so much on their romantic relationship front, or the romantic relationship is going great, but maybe they just can't get that health and diet under control. And so it's usually just like one or two areas that the person finds themselves slipping up. And I really wanted to write this because I wanted to demystify what self-sabotage is and get us all talking about it without stigma.
I love that you share that, because I think that's a common thing I see in my clients. I see in myself. I'm like, I can do this thing really well and reach a goal really well in this area, but I can't seem to do it in another area. So it's helpful to know that that's common, that feels a little bit better.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that sometimes people think, oh man, I self-sabotage. And then nothing really happens. Like they say that and then they kind of just move on. And, there are solutions. And my book is all about finding scientifically oriented solutions, things that have been shown in research to work. And I've worked this program with my clients and they've gotten so much benefit out of it. And I really wanted to make my book about how people can do this and address this in proven ways. And that way, hopefully people will feel like, okay, good. First of all, I'm not alone. And second of all, there is a method to the madness.
Yeah, and I love like what you shared too. I think it's really empowering. I mean, it can be frustrating to know that we're kind of hardwired this way or predisposed to self-sabotage, but also it can be empowering that, if we understand it, and you do a really good job. I mean, I'm a little bit of a science geek and biology nerd myself, but you actually do a really good job of explaining why we're predisposed to self-sabotage in a way that anyone can understand. So can you just kind of give us like a short summary? I know people can go into the book for more detail because I think it's really interesting, but why is this happening in our lives? Why do we do this?
Absolutely. So I believe that people self-sabotage because we really only have two primary drives as human beings to survive. And when the two primary drives are in balance, everything's great, hunky-dory, we're moving forward. But sometimes the balance gets thrown off for various reasons, and we can get into sort of why those reasons occur, and they're different for everybody. But once that reason or those reasons happen, then you're prone to sort of hit that self-sabotage switch where one of these humanly sort of derived drives kind of goes haywire. So the two drives are attaining rewards and avoiding threat. Makes sense, right? I mean, for us to all survive, we need to attain rewards, and rewards can be social rewards. They can be physical rewards that actually nurture us and make us thrive physically. And the other side of it is avoiding threat. Obviously, we need to avoid threat. We need to be able to stay alive. Except in the modern day, threat is not really the saber-toothed tiger for most of us, unless you willingly go on the show Survivor. Like, you're not actually useless on a daily basis going to have difficulty with physical thriving. Lucky us. But the emotional and psychological threats are what's predominating our lives now. So emotional and psychological threats are things like, what if I apply for that job and get laughed at? Or what if I present at this conference and nobody likes my message? Or what if I ask that person out and they reject me? And those things, in terms of our minds and brains and how we perceive them, there's no difference between that type of threat and a physical threat like a saber-toothed tiger. Our body and mind goes into fight or flight in either situation.
Hi, friends, it's Catherine, and that sound is the halfway point reminder for those of you who are joining us and going on an out and back walk, but only have 15 minutes. We are 7.5 minutes into the episode, so you'll want to turn around now. All right, back to my conversation with Dr. Judy.
And so sometimes, for various reasons, we will start to prioritize avoiding threat more than attaining reward. And if that happens chronically and persistently, that's when that self-sabotage switch has been turned on and you find yourself in a pattern of self-sabotage.
So it comes from this place of our biology where, we're just hardwired. Evolution hasn't caught up. We're trying to avoid threats that, in the past would, literally help us survive a situation in our environment, like that saber-toothed tiger you talked about. But now we're faced more with emotional and psychological threats that, to not be threatened by them, we're practicing avoidance, which is what self-sabotage is all about.
Right, exactly. And I think that, avoidance is such a powerful reinforcing mechanism that so many people don't realize. We talk about positive reinforcement a lot, like, rewards, right? Like, okay, you lose your first 10 pounds, that was part of your goal, and then you go and buy yourself a new dress. That's an awesome reward. But we don't realize that equally rewarding and sometimes even more powerful is negative reinforcement where, okay, I feel anxious about this event, so I'm going to make up an excuse and not go. And when you make up that excuse and you don't go, you get this sense of overwhelming relief. Whew, now I don't have to go to that event. And that is reinforcing. So the next time you have another event that might provoke any anxiety, you make up yet another excuse that also sends a flood of relief. And then over time, you just keep doing that avoidance behavior over and over again because it's in many ways kind of oddly pleasurable to be able to have that sense of relief and to basically not have whatever fear in your mind, have this chance of coming true. Because what if you go to this event and nobody talks to you? And, of course, in your mind, it's so much worse than it actually is. But because you've imagined it this way, every time you avoid, you feel better. And then you just get stuck in that cycle of avoidance.
And you have so many great tips for kind of busting this, but would you want to share maybe some of them, especially to break that cycle, because it seems like it really just is a cycle is kind of how it happens, right?
Absolutely. So, the cycle really, in terms of how to break it, it really all starts with your thoughts. And before we get into that, I want to kind of talk a little bit about the fact that all of us have the propensity to hit that self-sabotage switch, but
Sure.
for each of us, it's very, very different. And I made up an acronym to try to remember, how these factors can influence us. And the acronym is LIFE. And so life, each of the letters stand for a different thing. And for some people, they might find one of these factors trips them up. For other people, they may find all four, or maybe a combination of two or three. L stands for lower shaky self-esteem. And so when you think about that, a lot of people will say, I generally feel good about myself, but maybe there's one or two domains of life where I'm not as sure. Like maybe I feel great about myself as an athlete, but not great about myself as an academic prowess type of person. So there's maybe one or two areas that you feel shakier. And in those areas, you're going to self-sabotage more. You might not feel like you deserve good things to happen in that particular area, or question your own abilities. And that can really trip you up. I have internalized beliefs. These are the things that we learn in childhood. We learn these things from our parents, from other important adults who tell us and teach us about the ways of the world. And then as we become adults, sometimes we adopt their beliefs for ourselves. So if you had like a parent who was kind of a nervous Nelly, well, maybe as an adult, you might start to be that way as well. F stands for fear of the unknown, or fear of change. In general, human beings are not great with change. It makes sense because we want to be able to be masters of our own universes, but some personality types are better with it. Some personality types are not as good with it. And for those people who tend not to like change, and change makes them nervous, they're more likely to engage in those avoidance behaviors when something new comes up. And then the last one is excessive need for control. So this is for all of my type A overachieving people out there. And I say this with so much love because I see myself as a type A person. But, when you want to control everything, you might not move forward at all, because what types of things can you really control at all times? I mean, you may believe that you do, but truly we almost have, very little control in general. And so if you sort of have this sort of need to always control things, you may not move forward on a goal that needs you to kind of let go of the reins a little bit. And one of the best examples I can give is a romantic relationship, because there's a second person involved. And no matter what you do, you can't force that person to love you. You can't force that person to do the things that you want, because they have their own mind and their own thoughts. So those are the four types of factors that I think really feed into why people hit that self-sabotage switch. And once you recognize what those factors are, then it's time to pay attention to our thoughts, because every feeling and every action is preceded by a thought. And two people can be in the same exact situation, but if they think about it in different ways, they will have very different outcomes in terms of how they feel that day and what they do. And so I always say, we don't pay enough attention to our thoughts, in that we're not aware of most of them. But at the same time, we pay too much attention to our thoughts, because sometimes we think a thought and then we just believe that it's absolutely true, or it's coming true, and then it really messes up our day, especially when it's negative self-talk.
Right. Sure. No, and you have some great tools just to help people kind of break that, like the exercises that I have my book, and I have all my little post-it notes, and then I was so into it that I didn't even realize it. One great thing is that, going through, you're really explaining the background, and how all these 6 steps that you have set out for people tie together, but then you have all these great exercises at the end, even some additional ones that help us stop that. So it can be something we just kind of, we're going through the motions, we let our thoughts control our day, but it doesn't have to be like that.
Right, absolutely. And I think that a lot of times we believe that when a thought occurs that we have to act on it right away. And of course we don't. Most of the thoughts that we have are nonsense and don't mean anything. We have over 50 to 60,000 thoughts in a day. That's the average, at least from research. So, we clearly don't pay attention to all of them, but sometimes we give too much attention to things that are negative, and we need to be able to say, you know what, let's apply systematically some strategies to deal with them. And I have sort of 3 ways to deal with negative thoughts. The first one is to question them, like, do they really have weight here? So questioning them really involves, a couple of different things. But one of the easiest techniques is to kind of look at the evidence for and the evidence against a thought. So it's almost like when you're in court and you're a juror, you're trying to weigh the evidence. It's like, well, what's the evidence for this thought? What's the evidence against it? So if you have a thought like, man, I'm never going to be able to lose that weight and get to my goal weight. Okay, what's the evidence for that? And what's the evidence against it?
Hi friends, it's Catherine, and I hope you are enjoying these tips on how to stop self-sabotage and finding them to be insightful and empowering in your own life. Dr. Judy was so generous with her time that we ended up talking for a lot more than 15 minutes, actually closer to 30 minutes. And so I am pausing our conversation for today and inviting you to do two things. Number one, make sure you go stop by the show notes so you can enter that giveaway for her book. She's doing a signed copy as a giveaway for you. And number two, subscribe to the show so you don't miss out on the second half of our conversation, which will air tomorrow. And during that conversation, Dr. Judy will talk to you about goal setting, not just SMART goals. Most of us know what a SMART goal is. She actually is going to talk to you about how to make sure you're really motivated by your goal so you can achieve it. And the second thing she'll talk about is something that might surprise many of you, which is her beef with vision boarding and why you might not want to do a vision board this year, or what you could do in addition to that to make sure you really stop self-sabotaging and get to achieve what you are working on in 2020. Hope you're having a wonderful day, and you'll subscribe to the show, enter that giveaway, and get to enjoy more tips from Dr. Judy tomorrow and through her amazing book. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Fit 15.
For show notes and more, visit fitarmadillo.com/podcast.
See you next time.